Hey, what up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you. I have fallen in love with the wrestling podcast out there that is coming to you free via ESPN and Grantland Sports. It's called Cheap Heat. It's hosted by Grantland's own, the Masked Man, David Shoemaker, a.k.a. the Masked Man, the guy who writes Dead Wrestler of the Week. You can read that on Deadspin a long time, and he's also published a book, which I haven't had a chance to check out yet, but his co-host is Hot 97's Peter Rosenberg. I think a lot of people have seen Peter's videos on YouTube interviewing a lot of wrestlers. He's well known in the wrestling community. Both of these guys are, and I've really fallen in love with their podcast. I recently been following it. I think for the last month. I think I found out about it about the week after WrestleMania, and it is easily my favorite wrestling podcast that I listen to these days. I think they do one show a week if it comes down to it, but I think maybe it's because I'm listening to old ones. I'm trying to catch up and make it seem like I've listened to all of them as I listen to their library. It's a very fun show. Today, out of the middle of nowhere, during their discussion about what they're going to do with Daniel Bryan and the WWE Championship, how they could how they could crown a new champion if Daniel Bryan's not able to compete and they are forced to strip him. And they were talking about just basically how awesome the Intercontinental Tournament was, and basically if they brought back maybe like the King of the Ring pay-per-view or something like that in order to crown the new champion. It would be a fun way, and they went over their favorite King of the Ring moments, and then they went through and they listed their favorite kings. So in today's video, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be listing my top 5 favorite kings of wrestling from over my course of watching. So I hope you guys enjoy the video. Go over to iTunes, look up Cheap Heat, and definitely subscribe. Peter and David will definitely keep you entertained. So on to the top 5 kings of wrestling. Going to start off my list with number 5, none other than King Booker himself. Booker T becoming the king honestly set off one of my favorite spots there ever was in SmackDown history. I really thought that I thought he was going to change the game. If you go back to SmackDown that day, it seemed like it was almost the style of 80s wrestling was coming back, where everybody had a gimmick, everybody had some sort of a second job or some sort of a reason why they were there. Not everybody was just putting on trunks, coming down to the ring, and just ready to wrestle. I mean, Booker T was playing off like he was really a king. He brought on this sort of almost, I guess you could say, British accent. He had Queen Charmel come out with him, and they just really made you really hate them. You also look around, you had Finley coming out, he had a little leprechaun hornswoggle with him. Basically, this is the era that brought us guys like the Pirate, Paul Burchill. We saw the Boogeyman, just all sorts of weird wrestling gimmicks from the 80s returned. Booker T, of course, as King Booker, was he won the king by beating Bobby Lashley in a real big surprise, because I really thought that they were going to put I didn't think he was going to become King Bobby Lashley, but I definitely thought that he was going to win King of the Ring. It was definitely a swerve when Booker T won, but then it just was like, wow, this really makes sense, and this is really awesome, when he kept coming out as the king. From there, he rolled that into being the guy who beat Rey Mysterio during that very, very bad World Heavyweight Championship run after WrestleMania that year. But King Booker, number 5 on my list, always a good king. Great way to kick off the list. Number 4 on my list is going to be none other than Jerry the King Lawler, the longtime voice of WWE Raw. It is a shame that is how I know this man the most, but I do remember that when Jerry the King Lawler came in, and I think he replaced Bobby Heenan, or maybe he replaced Macho Man. I think he did replace Macho Man, but he came on to Monday Night Raw, and I was like, I don't even think then I knew Vince was running the show because I was a kid, but I was just like, why are they letting this guy on Monday Night Raw? He is so horrible. I never really paid attention to how good he was an announcer. I just fell hook, line, and sinker for everything that he was selling. Of course, you can think of back in the day, he was doing the long storyline with Bret Hart where he would make fun of Stu and Helen, his parents, just say how ugly Helen was, and he would make fun of Stu's voice, and I think he used to make fun of Stu drinking all the time. I never really knew that behind the scenes, Lawler and Hart were, best buddies. I just was like sticking up for, the fan favorite Bret, just saying how horrible it was. Everybody can remember that Bret was in the ring, and basically Jerry went up into the balcony and, was making fun of him. And it's only now that I've really, of course, it's always awesome now with Jerry, hopefully, getting the tapes together and getting me back on the his Memphis back onto the WWE network. But just from going out there and watching YouTube and, finding things like with him and Andy Kaufman and the Memphis Heat documentary really sold me on how great Jerry really was as a wrestler. Everybody can remember him and Michael Cole having the match at WrestleMania 27, which everybody said was him to get his WrestleMania moment, you can say. But what a horrible match. Stone Cold Steve Austin, stunning people. Seeing him live there in Atlanta, was an awesome moment. But if only one of my favorites, Jack Swagger, wasn't happened to be out there to see it. Jerry the King Lawler, if I would have saw more of his older stuff, like I'm seeing now, I'm sure it would be higher on the list. But at number 4 is Jerry the King Lawler. In a Vince Russo-like swerve, number 3 on the list is going to be none other than the Kings of Wrestling of Ring of Honor fame. I fell in love with these guys after seeing them live at my first Ring of Honor show the weekend of WrestleMania 27 in Atlanta. Seeing them there at center stage have an awesome match with the world's greatest tag team, then known as Claudio Castagnoli and Chris Hero, really just opened my eyes at how great these guys were. As everybody does when they go to a Ring of Honor show, I grabbed a handful of DVDs, and the one guys that I wanted to see more than anything was, the All Night Express, who really had an awesome match there on night 2 of those Ring of Honor shows. And then we also had the Briscoes. Those guys were awesome. They still are awesome. But basically from the shows that I watched, you watching the Kings of Wrestling, you just knew a guy like Claudio Castagnoli, now known as Cesaro in the WWE, was going to be a big deal. It's just a shame that, Chris Hero did enter into FCW, NXT, whatever you want to call it. He wasn't able to come out on the other side. He's back on the indie circuit as Chris Hero. We can all wish him luck. But at number 3 of the Kings of Wrestling, indie fame, but still very, very awesome. Cesaro has a lot of success, and I'm sure Chris Hero will bounce back and he'll find some in the future. But how awesome they once were. I think everybody can remember that Cesaro, doing one of his first promos when he was down there in NXT, saying that soon the Kings of Wrestling would ride again, and everybody marked out like crazy. It's just too bad. Besides for the one dark match against CM Punk in an NXT taping, we never got to see these guys team again. It would have been great in WWE. Number 2 on my list is going to be none other than the Macho King, Randy Savage. It's such a travesty that Randy Savage hasn't been inducted into the Hall of Fame. I honestly had to go to Wikipedia to find out how Randy Savage became the King of Wrestling. It says that he beat Hacksaw Jim Duggan in a match in May of 1989, but I have no memory of this. I just remember, Hacksaw sort of being like a dunce who had won, or just sort of put on the King of the Ring crown, and he was wearing it around, and just all of a sudden, Savage started wearing it, and he transformed after WrestleMania 5 into this guy who thought he was the king, and he was walking around. At the time he had, Queen Sensational Sherry, with him, and you just wanted to hate him for the one fact of, for all the time that he had been in the WWF, he had been with Miss Elizabeth, but because of the jealousy that had ran over between him and Hulk Hogan, now that he was running around with Queen Sherry, he once had the most beautiful girl in the world, and now he's running around with Scary Sherry. I mean, that's the best way to put it, but as a kid, you all know what she thought of Sherry. She looked like she got ran over with a truck. I never really, found out how great she was. It wasn't until she was inducted into the, WWE Hall of Fame, and I got to see the clips of everything she had done in the past. It was like, wow, she was a real women's wrestler. One that really, made women's wrestling proud. But, Macho Man, he had great matches as being the king. You know, he would go up against Hulk Hogan. It always sort of seemed like because he was the king, he was a true number one contender. It never really, didn't make sense that, Hogan kept beating this guy over and over and over again, and he kept getting chances at the title, and it made it believable. Of course, he went on to put his career on the line at WrestleMania against the Ultimate Warrior and lost. It was after that basically the Wrestling King sort of gimmick was retired until the King of the Ring came back. I believe Owen Hart was the first guy to really come back and run with it. Bret Hart won the first WWE pay-per-view King of the Ring, but because of Jerry the King Lawler smashing the crown and the scepter over his head, he never really got the chance to run as King Bret Hart. But I don't think anybody is really missing that. Owen really, had it, but he wasn't able to make the list. So we're going to leave Macho King as number 2, and we'll move on to number 1. With number 1, it's going to go to none other than King Harley Race. This is my king. He's number 1 on my list for the one reason of when I started watching wrestling, my first match that I can remember was the WrestleMania 3 VHS tape. I remember that, King Harley Race took on the Junkyard Dog in what I just watched back and was a very bad, very weird match. I said in my review that I made this year that just basically, I wish I would have seen more of King Harley Race, well, I guess not even King Harley Race, but the Harley Race of the NWA and Junkyard Dog of Mid-South. And this is one of the good reasons why the WWE Network is around, to see what these guys really were. But back in the day, I was one of those kids, straight Mark, I really believed these guys' gimmick as what they were. I believed that Harley Race really was the king. I never really asked of what country or continent or what, but he had a robe. He had a crown. That was all that I really needed to see that Harley Race was the king. I mean, I guess I really believed that all the other guys' gimmicks. I guess I believed that Brutus the Barber Beefcake was out there really cutting hair. DL Hopper was really out there, going out there and making sure people's drains were draining correctly. Duke the Dumpster Drosy was picking up the trash. It's one of the reasons why all those guys had second jobs back in the day. But Harley Race, as a kid being the king, it's hard to knock him as the king. So I know that he only lost being the king due to injury when I can't remember what had happened, but, he had to pass the crown on, and the Heenan family to King Haku, who was another great king. But, it's hard to replace those childhood memories, so Harley Race is going to be number 1. This was a very fun video to make. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys want to send on your video responses of your top kings, I'd be grateful to watch them and thankful that you guys did. Peace out, everybody. Have fun.